Hare Krishna. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Text number 21. Kalam karma sabhavam cha mayasho mayaya swaya atman yadrachaya praptum vibhushur upadade.
Krishna, the Lord, who is the controller of all energies, thus creates by his own potency eternal time, the fate of all living entities, and their particular nature for which they were created, and he again merges them independently.
Text number 22. Kalat gunayutikaraha parinama swabhavataha karmano janma mahataha purishadistita vabhut.
After the incarnation of the first Purusha, Navasayi Vishnu, the Mahat Tattva, or the principles of material creation, take place, and then time is manifested. And in course of time, the three qualities appear. Nature means three qualitative appearances. They transform into activities.
Text number 23. Mahatastu vikurvanad raja satvo pabrihitat tama pradhanastve abhavad dravya jnana kriyatmakaha.
Material activities are caused by the Mahat Tattvas being agitated. At first, there is transformation of the modes of goodness and passion, and later, due to the mode of ignorance, matter, its knowledge, and different activities of material knowledge come into play.
Text number 24. Sohankara iti prokto vikurvan samabutrida vaikarikastai jasascha tamasascheti yadvida dravya shakti kriya shaktir jnana shaktir iti prabho.
The self-centered materialistic ego, thus being transformed into three features, becomes known as the modes of goodness, passion, and ignorance in three divisions, namely the powers that evolve matter, knowledge of material creations, and the intelligence that guides such materialistic activities. Narada, you are quite competent to understand this.
Text number 25. Tamasadapi bhutade vikurvanad abunnabaha tasya matra guna sabdo lingam yadraste drishyayo.
From the darkness of false ego, the first of the five elements, namely the sky, is generated. Its subtle form is the quality of sound, exactly as the seer is in relationship with the seen.
Text number 26 to 29. Nabaso tve vikurvanad abut sparsha gunanila paranvayach shabdavamscha prana oja sahobalam vayurapi vikurvanad kalakarma svabhavataha udapadyata tejo vai रूपवत् स्पर्श शब्दवत् तेजसस्तु विकुर्वाणात् आशेद् अम्बोरसत्मकं रूपवत् स्पर्शवत् घोषवाचा परान्वयात् विशेषस्तु विकुर्वाणात् अम्बशो गन्धवानभूत् परान्वयात् रसास्पर्शा शब्दरूपा गुणान्विता.
Because the sky is transformed, the air is generated with the quality of touch, and by the previous succession, the air is also full of sound and the basic principles of duration of life, sense perception, mental power, and bodily strength. When the air is transformed in course of time and nature's course, fire is generated, taking shape with the sense of touch and sound. Since fire is also transformed, there is a manifestation of water, full of juice and taste. As previously, it also has form and touch and is also full of sound. And water, being transformed from all variegatedness on earth, appears odorous and, as previously, becomes qualitatively full of juice, touch, sound, and form, respectively.
Text number 30. Vaikarikan mano jajne deva vaikarika dasa digvatarka pracheto svi vahnindryo pendro mitrakaha.
From the mode of goodness, the mind is generated and becomes manifest, as also the 10 demigods controlling the bodily movements. Such demigods are known as the controller of directions, the controller of air, the sun god, the father of Daksha, Prajapati, the Ashwini Kumaras, the fire god, the king of heaven, the worshipable deity in heaven, the chief of the Adityas, and Brahmaji, the Prajapati, all come into existence.
Text number 31. Taijasatu vikurvanad indriyani dasad bhavan jnana shaktir kriya shaktir buddhir pranasta tejasau srotram tvagrina digjihva vagdor medrangri payavaha.
By further transformation of the mode of passion, the sense organs like the ear, skin, nose, eyes, tongue, mouth, hands, genitals, legs, and the outlet for evacuating, together with intelligence and living energy, are all generated.
Text number 32. Yadaiti sangata bhava bhutendriya manoguna yada yatana nirmane naseku brahma vittama.
O Narada, best of the transcendentalists, the forms of the body cannot take place as long as these created parts, namely the elements, senses, mind, and modes of nature, are not assembled.
Text number 33. Tada samhatya chanyonyam bhagava shakti choditaha sada satvam upadaya shobhayam sasrujur hayadaha.
Thus, when all these became assembled by force of the energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, this universe certainly came into being by accepting both the primary and secondary causes of creation.
Text number 34. Varshapuga sahasrante tad andam udake sayam kalakarma swabhavo prabhavasto jivo jivam ijivayat.
Thus, all the universes remained thousands of eons within the water, the causal ocean, and the Lord of living beings entering in each of them caused them to be fully animated.
Text number 35. Saeva purishastasmad andam nirvidya nirgataha sahasrodhi angri bahve aksha sahasrana sirsavan.
The Lord, Mahavishnu, although lying in the coastal ocean, came out of it, and dividing himself as Hiranyagarbha, he entered into each universe and assumed the Virat Rupa, with thousands of legs, arms, mouths, heads, etc.
636. Yasye hava yavai lokan kalpayat kalpayanti manishinaha katya adibir ada sapta saptordvam janganadibi.
Great philosophers imagine that the complete planetary systems in the universe are displays of the different upper and lower limbs of the universal body of the Lord.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, you're muted.
Sorry, Mataji, I didn't know when I got muted. 37, I'll just repeat again. Purushasya mukham brahma, shatram etasya bahavaha, urvarvaisho bhagavataha, padyam sudro vijayata.
The Brahmanas represent his mouth, the Kshatriyas his arms, the Vaishyas his thighs, and the Shudras are bone of his legs.
Text number 38. Burloka kalpita padyam, buvadlokosya nabitaha, hridar swadloka urasa, maharloko mahatmanaha.
The lower planetary systems, up to the limit of the earthly stratum, are said to be situated in his legs. The middle planetary systems, beginning from Bhuvarloka, are situated in his navel. And the still higher planetary systems, occupied by the demigods and highly cultured sages and saints, are situated in the chest of the Supreme Lord.
Text number 39. Grivayam janalokosya tapoloko stanadvayat murdabe satyalokastu brahmaloka sanatana.
From the forefront of the chest up to the neck of the universal form of the Lord are situated the planetary systems named Janaloka and Tapaloka, whereas Satyaloka, the topmost planetary system, is situated on the head of the form. The spiritual planets, however, are eternal.
Text 40 to 41. Tatkatyam katalam kliptam urubhyam vitalam bibo janubhyam sutalam sudam jangabhyam tu talatalam mahatalam tu gulpabhyam prapadabhyam rasatalam patalam padat talata iti loko maya puman.
My dear son Narada, know from me that there are 7 lower planetary systems out of the total 14. The first planetary system, known as Atala, is situated on the waist. The second, Pitala, is situated on the thighs. The third, Sutala, on the knees. The fourth, Talatala, on the shanks. The fifth, Mahatala, on the ankles. The sixth, Rasatala, on the upper portion of the feet. And the seventh, Patala, on the soles of the feet. Thus, the Virat form of the Lord is full of all planetary systems.
642. Bhuvarloko kalpita padyam, bhuvarloko syanabitaha, swarloko kalpito murdna, iti va loka kalpana.
Others may divide the whole planetary system into 3 divisions, namely the lower planetary systems on the legs up to the earth, the middle planetary systems on the navel, and the upper planetary systems, Swarloka, from the chest to the head of the Supreme Personality. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Shyam Prabhu. Nice recitation.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
It's nice to get a view of your bhajan kutir too. And thank you, Vatsala Mataji, for English recitation. So,
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
So welcome, dear devotees, to tonight's chat session. We continue with our reading and discussion of the second canto of Srimad Bhagavatam and the 5th chapter entitled The Cause of All Causes. Today we shall be discussing text number 24 and 25 in more detail. So let's start off by reciting the Mangala Charanam prayers. You can also feel free to join in behind muted mics. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Shri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yata Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sahagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutan Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamsja He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastate Tapta Kanchana Gourangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sutadevi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivashadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prashtaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschacha Deshatarine Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Share my screen. So just a quick recap of where we are. So Maharaj Parikshit had asked Shukdev Goswami, what is the duty of one who is about to die? And Shukdev Goswami has responded that the best activity for one who is about to die is to constantly hear about, chant about, remember and worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So Maharaj Parikshit wanted to hear. So what to hear? To hear about the Leela of the Lord, the pastimes of the Lord. So the Lord has different types of Leela. That Leela he performs in the material world, and that Leela which he performs in the spiritual world. So Maharaj Parikshit was first interested in hearing about the Leela the Lord performs in the material world. And that is the Leela in connection with the Purusha avatars, the creation Leela. And he wanted to understand about this Leela. And Shukdev Goswami said, okay, I shall explain to you. But the questions that you've asked was asked long time ago by Narad Muni to Lord Brahma. So I will quote that conversation, the Narada Brahma Samvad. So Narada had asked the Lord 3 questions. The first question was Yat Rupam. Please explain the symptoms of the universe. The 5 symptoms that was explained. I won't go into that, but you know, Dravya Kala, Karma, Swabhava, Jiva. And the second question he asked is, Yad Adhistanam Yat Param. Now, please explain the shelter and dependence of the universe. Who is this universe taking shelter of, and who is this universe dependent on? And that was explained. Narayana. Everything is dependent on Narayana. Everything comes from Narayana. Everything is a manifestation of his energy. Nothing is there besides that which emanates from Narayana. And then the third question was Yatash Shrishta. He wanted to know about the creation of the universe. So now we are in that section, verses 21 to 35 is describing creation. Now, in connection with the description of creation, there's two parts to the discussion. The first part of the discussion is Karana Shrishti, meaning how are the ingredients that make up the material creation formed. And then the second one is described, which is in verses 32 to 35. What is Karya Shrishti? Now that you've got the ingredients, how does it assemble? Just like when we make a sabji, we gather the ingredients, oil, vegetables, spices, and so on. And then you assemble the ingredients to form a sabji. So the first part of the discussion that Lord Brahma explains to Narada is called Karana Shrishti. How are these ingredients formed? And in total, there are 23 ingredients. So the content of the verses we are discussing today is the formation. Part of the verses we're discussing is the formation of the 23 ingredients, and that is called Karana Shrishti. Okay, so let us go through that, and then we shall discuss. So text number 24. Sohankara iti prokto vikurvan samabutridha vaikarikas taijayascha tamasascheti yadvidha dravya shakti kriya shaktir jnana shaktir iti prabho. So word for word, sa, the very same thing. Ahankara, ego. Iti, thus. Prokta, said. Vikurvan, being transformed. Samabhut, become manifested. Trida, in three features. Vaikharika, in the mode of goodness. Taijasa, in the mode of passion. Cha, and tamasa, in the mode of ignorance. Cha, also. Iti, thus. Yat, what is? Bida, divided. Dravya Shakti, powers that evolve matter. Kriya Shakti, initiation that creates. Jnana Shakti, intelligence that guides. Iti, thus, Prabhu, O Master. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. The self-centered materialistic ego, thus being transformed into three features, becomes known as the modes of goodness, passion, and ignorance in three divisions, namely the powers that evolve matter, knowledge of material creations, and the intelligence that guides such material activities. Narada, you are quite competent to understand this. Purport. Materialistic ego, or the sense of identification with matter, is grossly self-centered, devoid of clear knowledge of the existence of God. And this self-centered egoism of the materialistic living entities is the cause of them being conditioned by the other paraphernalia and continuing their bondage of material existence. in the Bhagavad Gita, the self-centered egoism is very nicely explained in the 7th chapter, verses 24 to 27. The self-centered impersonalist, without a clear conception of the personality of Godhead, concludes in his own way that the personality of Godhead takes a material shape from his original impersonal spiritual existence for a particular mission. And this misleading conception of the Supreme Lord by the self-centered impersonalist continues, even though he is seen to be very interested in the Vedic literatures, such as the Brahma Sutras and other highly intellectual sources of knowledge. This ignorance of the personal feature of the Lord is due simply to the ignorance of the mixture of different modes. The impersonalist cannot conceive of the Lord's eternal spiritual form of eternal knowledge, bliss, and existence. The reason is that the Lord reserves the right of not exposing himself to the non-devotee, who even after a thorough study of literature like the Bhagavad Gita, remains an impersonalist simply by obstinacy. This obstinacy is due to the action of Yoga Maya, a personal energy of the Lord that acts like an aide-de-camp by covering the vision of the obstinate impersonalist. Such a bewildered human being is described as Muda, or grossly ignorant, because he is unable to understand the transcendental form of the Lord as being unborn and unchangeable. If the Lord takes a form or material shape from his original impersonal feature, then it means that he is born and changeable from impersonal to personal. But he is not changeable, nor does he ever take a new birth like a conditioned soul. The conditioned soul may take a form birth after birth due to his conditional existence in matter. But the self-centered impersonalists, by their gross ignorance, accept the Lord as one of them because of self-centered egoism, even after so-called advancement of knowledge in the Vedanta. The Lord, being situated in the heart of every individual living entity, knows very well the tendency of such conditioned souls in terms of past, present, and future. But the bewildered conditioned soul hardly can know him in his eternal form. By the will of the Lord, therefore, the impersonalist, even after knowing the Brahman and Paramatma features of the Lord, remains ignorant of his eternal personal feature as ever-existent Narayan, transcendental to all material creation. The cause of such gross ignorance is constant engagement by the materialistic man in the matter of artificially increasing material demands. To realize the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one has to purify the materialistic senses by devotional service. The mode of goodness, or the Brahmanical culture recommended in the Vedas, is helpful to such spiritual realization. And thus the Jnana Shakti stage of the conditioned soul is comparatively better than the other two stages, namely the Drava Shakti and Kriya Shakti. The all material civilization is manifested by a huge accumulation of materials, or in other words, raw materials for industrial purposes. And the industrial enterprises, Kriya Shakti, are all due to gross ignorance of spiritual life. In order to rectify this great anomaly of materialistic civilization based on the principles of Drava Shakti and Kriya Shakti, one has to adopt the process of devotional service of the Lord by adoption of the principles of Karma Yoga, mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita as follows: Yat karosi yad ashnasi. Yad jahasi dadasi yat tapasyasi konteya yat kurusva. Mad arpanam. O son of Kunti, all that you do, all that you eat, all that you offer and give away, as well as all austerities that you may perform, should be done as an offering to me. So there's a lot being packed into this verse and purport. Many different terminologies. Dravya Shakti, Kriya Shakti, Jnana Shakti, Ahankara. Then Trida, three features. Vaikarika in the mode of goodness, Taijasa in the mode of passion, and Tamasa, and then Prabhupada is talking in the verse about ingredients. Prabhupada discusses a lot in the purport about the effects and the impact of Hankara, the false ego. So I just spend a little time putting all of this into context. If you recall, at the beginning of the class, I said verses 21 to 35, which this sits right in the middle of, is all about Karana Shrishti, describing the material elements. So let's put everything into perspective. Have you all seen this diagram before, devotees? Oops, what happened? Sorry. Hare Krishna. Are you all seeing the diagram on the screen?
Yeah.
Little same. Okay, let's put this into context. So this particular verse, we are at the stage of Ahankara, and you can see Jnana Shakti, Kriya Shakti, and Rava Shakti. So just do a quick recap of how we got to this stage. So Lord Brahma, firstly, he corrects Narada. Narada was thinking that he is the creator. And Brahma said, no, you're making a big mistake. No, I'm not the creator. I don't even create the ingredients. That all comes from the Lord. So we hear in this chapter how the Lord manifests as Mahavishnu, who is one of the Purusha avatars. And this Mahavishnu, or Karanadakshayi Vishnu, he is known as a Swamsa incarnation. That means part of the part of Krishna. Swamsha. So Mahavishnu, he initiates the creation. And how does the Lord initiate the creation? He impregnates the material nature by his glance. So he impregnates this material energy or material nature with the jivas. And with the jivas always come with their karma, and they come with the impressions in their mind, which is swabhava. So you can imagine these jivas at the end of creation, they are in a latent stage, but they have their karma and they have their swabhava. Swabhava means the impressions of their past births with them. So the Lord impregnates the jivas, and when he impregnates the material energy with the jivas, their karma and their swabhava come with them. And then the Lord also activates, the activating principle of creation is kala, time. So the Lord introduces the jivas and kala. And that stage where the three modes of material nature is the energy or the Shakti by which the Lord initiates creation and perpetuates it. So those three modes of nature, they are in an inactive stage initially. And that is called Pradhan. Pradhan. Now, with the influence of time, with the passage of time, lots of time, time transforms the Pradhan into Mahat Tattva. So you can imagine there's unmanifested Pradhan, there's a long passage of time, and with the passage of time, we get Mahat Tattva. And the Mahat Tattva is primarily made up of the Sattva Gun, the mood of goodness. But with a further passage of time, time is activating it. Time is transforming all of these activities, energy of the Lord. Then we get what is called Sutra Tattva or Rajas. So time is working its influence now. And then we got the Mahat Tattva. Now the Mahat Tattva, with the introduction of time or the passage of time, there's the manifestation of Tamagun. And when Tamagun is introduced, then we get what is called the Hankara, the false ego. So you can imagine the jivas are there in the material energy, still in the latent stage. And then with the introduction or with the passage of time, there's the Mahatattva and then there's the false ego. And it's at that point in time, the jivas come under the influence of the Ahankara, the false ego, thinking that they are something different to their real nature. By the introduction of Ahankara, we start thinking different. And Srila Prabhupada spends a long time, he goes to great effort in the purport of this verse, explaining how this Ahankara is so deceiving to the living entity. And Prabhupada goes to the point of not talking about the ordinary deception of the false ego, where the living entity starts to conceive himself or herself different to who they really are. Prabhupada talks about the ultimate deception, the ultimate influence of the false ego. And Prabhupada talks about it in the context of one, the Mayavadi or the impersonal understanding, where they think that the impersonal adopts a material form. And Prabhupada says how under false ego, under this false impression of being knowledgeable, they even mistake themselves to be God. And the whole process of spiritual life is the unwinding or the stripping of the false ego. His Holiness Bhakti Tirtha Swami used to have a saying, we have to die before we die. He used to say we have to die before we have to die. And what did he mean by that? It means the false ego has to die. This false conception of who we are, that has to die before we can die. And I said this before once. I asked His Grace Pankajangri Prabhu, who is sadly no longer with us, a great, great Vaishnav. I was speaking to him and I said, Prabhu, it's so difficult to give up this false ego. How to give it up? Even in our Krishna consciousness, it stays there. It inhibits us. It holds us back in our spiritual life. And he said, false ego simply means acting in a state that we are not. But what is the real state? What is that state when we are without false ego? And he said, that state when we are without false ego is when we identify ourselves with our real ego. Jivera Swaraphoy, Krishnera Nityadas. And he said, if you just act in all stages of your life, in all your activities, in the consciousness that you are servant of Krishna, you are servant of the devotees of Krishna, then you're acting on your real ego. And automatically the false ego is gone. He said it's like an imperceptible dissemination of the false ego. False ego means acting in a state that we are not. Real ego means acting in the state that we are. And if we act always a servant of the servant of the servant of the Lord, then we automatically come. So in one sense, dying before we die, getting rid of the false ego simply means establishing ourselves more and more and more on the platform of Jivera Swaraphoy, Krishnera Nityadas. I am servant of the servant of the servant. Okay, let's come back to the verse now. The three terminologies there used: Jnana Shakti, Kriya Shakti, Dravya Shakti. So the Ankara, predominantly in the mode of goodness, that leads to the manifestation of the mind and the 10 senses devatas. That is, maybe I'll come back to that. And then the Ahankara manifested as Kriya Shakti, that leads to the manifestation of the 10 senses and intelligence. And the Ahankara manifested as Drava Shakti, that leads to the manifestation of the 10, the 5 tanmatras and the 5 elements. So you see here the Kriya Shakti. That's the 10 senses. What are the 10 senses? The 10 senses are the 5 knowledge acquiring senses, and then the 5 working senses. And what are the 5 knowledge acquiring senses? It's the ears. Through ears we acquire knowledge. The eyes, the skin, the nose, and the tongue. Those are the 5 knowledge acquiring senses. And then there's the 5 working senses. And what are the 5 working senses? The hands, the feet, the voice, the anus, and the genitals. And then we have the 10 material elements. And it all starts off with sound. Sound is the most subtle. From sound, we get ether. Sound manifests ether. And ether, from ether we get touch. And from touch, you get air. You know, you can feel the air. And from air, you get form. And from form, we get fire, because you can see the fire. It's manifest form. And from fire, you get taste. And from taste, you get water. Krishna says, I am the taste of water. And from water, we get smell. And then from smell, we get earth. And then the 10, the Jnana Shakti, We said that's the mind and the 10 devatas. So for the ears, you get the big devatas. For the eyes, it's Surya. For the skin, it's Vayu. For the nose, it's the Ashwini Kumaras. For the tongue, it's Varuna. For the hands, it's Indra. For the feet, it's Upendra. For the voice, it's Agni. For the anus, it's Mitra. And for the genitals, it's Prajapati. So these are the 10 sense devatas. So how many you got here? 11. Then, okay, 10, 10, 10. That's how many? Sorry. We're leaving aside the devatas. So it's 10 5 working senses, 5 knowledge acquiring centers, 5 tanmatras, and 5 elements. So that's 20. And then you have mind, you have intelligence, and then you have false ego. And that comes to 23. So these are the ingredients known as Karana Shakti. And only when they become assembled, they're known as Karya Shakti. And that's, I don't want to jump into that. We will be discussing that a little further on later on. But I thought I'll just put this verse in context. Verse 25 automatically leads on to this. And maybe we'll come back to the diagram when we discuss the details of that. But let's go back now to verse number 25. Tamasadapi bhutade vikurvanad abhunnabha tasyamatra guna shabdo lingam yad drashtrir drishayayo. From the darkness of false ego, the first of the 5 elements, namely the sky, is generated. Its subtle form is the quality of sound, exactly as the seer is in relationship with the seen. The 5 elements, namely sky, air, fire, water, and earth, are all but different qualities of the darkness of false ego. So if you remember the diagram that we were looking at, we said that the Drava Shakti, which is a manifestation of the mode of ignorance, which is Prabhupada refers here to the darkness of the false ego. He says this means that the false ego is the sum total form of the Mahatattva. It is generated from the marginal potency of the Lord. And it's due to this false ego of lording it over the material creation, ingredients are generated for the false enjoyment of the living being. Prabhupada is saying, because we have the false ego to lord it over, that leads to the manifestation of these different ingredients. The living being is practically the dominating factor over the material elements as the enjoyer, though the background is the Supreme Lord. Factually, save and accept the Lord, no one can be called the enjoyer. But the living entity falsely desires to become the enjoyer. That is the origin of the false ego. That means, Prabhupada is explaining, like once Sachinandan Prabhu Maharaj was explaining that when his father first met Srila Prabhupada in Germany, his father said, "Why did Krishna create Maya?" And immediately Prabhupada shot back. He says, "Krishna didn't create Maya. You created Maya." Prabhupada is basically saying that this whole material manifestation originates out of the false ego for us to lord it over material nature, for us to become the enjoyer. without that consciousness of becoming the enjoyer, without the influence of the false ego, there is no need for the material universe. And Prabhupada used to say sometimes that if everyone becomes a devotee, this will become Vaikuntha. Even this world will become Vaikuntha. So Vaikuntha is not necessarily a place, it's the consciousness of the inhabitants. It's the consciousness. When the bewildered living beings desire this, the shadow elements are generated by the will of the Lord, and the living entities are allowed to run after them as after a phantasmagoria. Prabhupada used to sometimes use the analogy of the mirage in the desert. We see an oasis in the desert, we run after it, but when we get there, it's just a mirage. This is the material nature. It is said that the first tan matra, not mantra, the tan matra sound is created, and then the sky. And in this verse, it is confirmed that actually it is so. But sound is a subtle form of sky, and the distinction is like that between the seer and the sea. The sound is a representation of the actual object, as the sound produced, speaking of the object, gives an idea of the description of the object. Therefore, sound is a subtle characteristic of the object. Prabhupada is using a nice analogy here. That the sound, by sound we can have an idea of the object. So from sound, the manifestations start to take place. Similarly, sound representation of the Lord in terms of his characteristics is the complete form of the Lord, as was seen by Vasudeva and Maharaj Dasharat, the fathers of Lord Krishna and Lord Ram. The sound representation of the Lord is non-different from the Lord himself, because the Lord and his representation in sound are absolute knowledge. Lord Chaitanya has instructed us that in the holy name of the Lord, a sound representation of the Lord, all the potencies of the Lord are invested. Thus, one can immediately enjoy the association of the Lord by the pure vibration of the sound vibration of his holy name. And the concept of the Lord is immediately manifested before the pure devotees. A pure devotee, therefore, is not aloof from the Lord, even for a moment. The holy name of the Lord is recommended in the Shastras. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. May therefore be constantly chanted by the devotee, aspiring to be constantly in touch with the Supreme Lord. For one who is thus able to associate with the Lord is sure to be delivered from the darkness of the created world, which is the product of false ego. Tamasmi ma jyotir gama. So Prabhupada is focusing on the purport, on the principle of sound. Here we can see how all of the ingredients are manifesting from sound. So Prabhupada is talking about spiritual sound. We hear that Krishna and his name are non-different. So if we can extrapolate that same understanding in terms of a completely spiritual sound, which is the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, we can have some idea to the principle of how Krishna and his holy name are non-different. In his name is his Nama, Rupa, Guna, his qualities, his Lila, his Dham. Everything is there in the holy name of Krishna. So Prabhupada is so wonderfully in the purport, not giving us just a low-level understanding of this principle of how everything can manifest from sound. Prabhupada is raising our consciousness to understand how this Hare Krishna Maha Mantra is non-different from Krishna also. So I think I'll stop here. It's 8:40. That was a very quick explanation of these verses. Hopefully it makes sense to you, dear devotees. But if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Hare Krishna. Does it make sense?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhuji, for the nice class. Prabhuji, could you please elaborate or explain where Prabhupada said in the purport that Krishna hasn't created this Maya, you have created it? Isn't it is created by Krishna's external energy, this Maya? What's that mean that we have created this Maya?
Okay, wait, let me go to the purport.
Hare Krishna.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna. You want to?
So just in this one, there is one Shastra, one reference, and the prayers of Kadma Prajapati. He mentions, Naitad Batadisha Padam Tavepchitam Yanmayanaha Tanusya Bhota Sukshmam Anugrahaya Astu Api Rihimaya Lasatulasya Bhagavan Vilakshitaha. So there he mentions this material world, it is not the wish of the Supreme Lord. Naitad Batadisha Padam Tavepchitam. Tava ipchitam. Naitad Bata Adisha Padam Tavepchitam. So he mentions this very beautiful thing. Yanmaya naha tanuse bhota sukshmam. Only for our sake you have created this material world. So like that, Kadma Prajapati says, Anugrahaya astu api yerhi maya lasatulasya bhagavan vilakshitaha. So when the Lord was situated in the sky, so he mentions this statement, only for the sake of living entities he created, not it is the wish of the Lord.
Yes.
Hare Krishna, please accept my humble obeisances. Hare Krishna.
Please accept. Thank you, Prabhu. That's exactly what Prabhupada was implying, that it's like Krishna doesn't want to create Maya. Maya is manifested simply. And Prabhupada is saying here, factually, save and accept the Lord, no one can be called the enjoyer. But the living entity falsely desires to become enjoyer. This is the origin of false ego. Sometimes another example is given. You know, the mother is cooking, making sabji on the stove, on the gas. Then the child will see, oh, I want to cook. I want to cook also, just like you. Then the child is not capable of cooking on the stove. So the mother gave a small toy stove, toy ingredients, say, okay, you cook. And the child pretends like it's cooking. So the mother manifested that little toy kitchen, bought or whatever with the utensils, because the child insisting, I want to cook. So we too, we are not the enjoyer. We are not the enjoyer. But we want to pretend that we are the enjoyer and the controller. So Krishna says, okay, I give you false ego. False ego covers who you really are, right? I give you the material world as you desire, so you can play it out. You understand, Girish Prabhu?
Yes, Prabhuji.
That's
But
what.
I'm still trying to think, Prabhuji, that in the spiritual world, that's basically, it's a different desire. It's not a material world desire. It's a different desires there, where basically everyone would be serving Krishna and and
Okay, let's not go for far that for now. For now, just look at it in the context of the jivas in the material world already, and in the purpose of the creation. I mean, we can talk. That's also a very big and wide topic about how the jivas fall into the material world, and I think we briefly touched it on previously. But for now, just look at the jivas already caught in the material world, who haven't given up this false conception of being desire and enjoyer and controller. This is how the material creation goes on through the process of, through the manifestation of Sattva gun, there is creation. Through the manifestation of Rajagun, there's maintenance, and then there's a manifestation of Tamagun. There is the destruction of the material universe. So these things are happening time and time again. So the point being, for the context of what we are discussing now, which is largely to be about the Purusha avatars, the creation, the living entities have already fallen, and they're in the cycle for unlimited time. They are at the end of creation, they go into a latent state in the Lord, and then with the Lord, at the start of creation, he impregnates them again.
Okay, Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
I think that was a brilliant example to help us understand about the child and the mother, and actually the safety and the level of level of safety and level of their ability. So that helps me to understand it very well. Thank you. Yeah, it connects very well with the verse, what you were trying to say, Prabhu. Haribol.
Thank you, Chandra. It's so nice that Parikshit Maharaj is asking these questions, and how in this canto at the beginning, we're getting all of this knowledge to purify our consciousness. And as we start to understand more of the Lord's other leelas, we have been prepared, to understand who we are and the Lord's potency in relation to the material creation and so on. Okay. So let me see if there's any questions on the. Sometimes Buddhists are shy. Write questions on the chat. Okay, there's nothing. Okay, thank you very much, dear devotees. All glories to your service. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Panchakalpa Tulabhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Ananta Koti Vaishnava
Vaishnavinda ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Premanande.
Haribol.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhuji, for the insightful class. Thank you, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Haribol.
Thank you very
Hare
much.
Krishna. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you, Prabhuji, for nice class.